Imagine being betrayed not just by the one you love, but by your own blood. This is the story of how my wife humiliated me in front of my entire family, flirted shamelessly with my brother, and left me questioning everything about my life. Stay with me until the end because the twist will leave you speechless, and what I did next might just change the way you see toxic relationships forever. It was a Thursday evening when my phone buzzed with a text from my mom. "Jack, we're hosting a family gathering this Saturday. It's been too long. Bring Amanda." Her enthusiasm jumped off the screen, but I hesitated before replying. I stared at the message for a long moment, my chest tightening with anxiety. Amanda, my wife of 6 years, had changed over time. What started as playful banter in our early days had turned into biting sarcasm, her words cutting deeper than she realized, or maybe exactly as deep as she intended. "Still," I replied, "we'll be there," trying to convince myself that everything would be fine. On Saturday morning, Amanda was already in a mood. "Jack, why do you always wear that shirt? It makes you look like a dad from a bad sitcom," she scoffed, pulling out one of her sleek black dresses. I didn't respond. I'd learned that arguing would only escalate things. The drive to my parents' house was tense. Amanda scrolled through her phone, barely looking up, while I tried to focus on the road. "Try not to embarrass me this time, okay?" she said flatly, as if the words were a casual reminder. My grip on the steering wheel tightened. When we arrived, my mom greeted us warmly. "Amanda, you look stunning, as always," she said, her voice full of genuine affection. Amanda smiled and leaned in for a hug, transforming into the charming version of herself that my family adored. I followed behind, feeling like an afterthought in my own story. As soon as we stepped into the house, the familiar smell of baked ham and cinnamon filled the air. My mom was bustling around the kitchen, while my dad and brother, Trevor, lounged in the living room, laughing over a football game. For a brief moment, I felt a flicker of comfort, like maybe this evening would be okay. But that feeling didn't last. Amanda slipped off her coat and immediately became the center of attention. "Amanda, you're glowing. What's your secret?" one of my aunts gushed. She gave a coy laugh, brushing her hair back. "Oh, just staying stress-free," she said with a pointed glance in my direction. The comment landed like a slap, but I forced a smile and kept quiet. Dinner was announced shortly after, and we all gathered around the long oak table that had been in the family for generations. Amanda took her seat next to me, but it felt like we were miles apart. As plates were passed around, she began her routine. "So, Jack," she said loudly enough for the whole table to hear, "remember the time you tried to fix the sink and flooded the kitchen? You looked so helpless." The table erupted into polite laughter, but my stomach churned. "YouTube tutorials aren't for everyone," she added with a smirk. I wanted to defend myself, but before I could, Amanda was already launching into another story. This one about how I once got lost driving in our own neighborhood. He had to pull over and use Google Maps. "Can you believe that?" she said, her laughter echoing around the room. Trevor, my younger brother, tried to lighten the mood. "Come on, Amanda. We all have our moments," he said with a grin. But Amanda didn't let up. "Oh, don't worry, Trevor. I'm sure you've got better instincts than Jack," she said, leaning slightly toward him. I watched as her body language shifted, her posture relaxing, her smile widening as she directed her attention more and more toward Trevor. It was subtle at first, but as the evening wore on, it became impossible to ignore. By the time dessert was served, Amanda was fully engaged with my brother, laughing at his jokes and brushing her hand against his arm. Trevor seemed uncomfortable but unsure how to respond. I, on the other hand, was frozen, humiliated and helpless in my own family's home. When the meal was over, I excused myself to the bathroom. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, my face pale and my eyes tired. "What's happening to my life?" I whispered to no one. I splashed cold water on my face and tried to steady my breathing, dreading the rest of the evening. But as I walked back out into the living room, I realized that the worst was yet to come. When I returned to the living room, the mood had shifted, but not in a way that felt comforting. Amanda was sitting on the couch next to Trevor, her legs crossed toward him, leaning just close enough to blur the lines between playful and suggestive. My parents were busy in the kitchen, clearing dishes, and the rest of the family was spread out in small groups. No one seemed to notice the storm brewing in the corner of the room, except me. Trevor caught my eye and gave me an awkward smile. I could tell he wasn't sure what to make of Amanda's behavior. He'd always been the golden child, the charming, athletic, outgoing brother who could win over a room without trying. I never held it against him. In fact, I admired him. But tonight, that admiration twisted into something darker. "Jack," Amanda called out, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Come sit with us. Trevor was just telling me about his last hiking trip. Did you know he climbed Angel's Landing? Isn't that impressive?" I nodded, walking over to join them, though every step felt like I was walking into a trap. "Yeah, Trevor's always been the adventurous one," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, come on, Jack," Amanda said with a teasing grin. "You wouldn't even climb the ladder to clean the gutters last summer. I had to hire someone." She laughed, and Trevor chuckled nervously, clearly not wanting to get involved. I clenched my jaw, the humiliation simmering just beneath the surface. "I didn't want to risk breaking my neck," I said, trying to keep the mood light. But Amanda wasn't finished. "Well, Trevor, if I ever need a real man to help around the house, I'll know who to call," she said with a wink. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My hands clenched into fists at my sides, but I forced myself to stay calm. This was my family's gathering, and I wasn't going to cause a scene. The evening dragged on, with Amanda monopolizing Trevor's attention at every opportunity. She laughed at his jokes, asked him questions about his job, and even playfully nudged him when he made a witty comment. Every interaction felt like another crack in the fragile wall I'd built to keep my emotions in check. At one point, my mom came over and sat down beside me. "Jack, are you okay? You've been awfully quiet tonight," she said softly. I wanted to tell her everything, to pour out the months of frustration, anger, and hurt that had built up inside me. But instead, I forced a smile and said, "I'm fine, Mom, just tired from work." She gave me a concerned look but didn't press further. The night dragged on, and as the clock ticked closer to midnight, I felt like I was suffocating. Amanda's voice, her laughter, her little touches on Trevor's arm, they all blended into a cacophony of torment. By the time we finally left, I was a hollow shell of myself. Amanda, as if sensing my pain, seemed more alive than ever, her smile wide and her eyes sparkling as she said goodbye to my family. In the car, I stared straight ahead, my hands gripping the steering wheel. Amanda leaned back in her seat, scrolling through her phone, completely unbothered. "Your family is so sweet," she said casually. "Trevor especially. He's such a good listener." I didn't respond. Couldn't. As we pulled into the driveway, I sat in the car for a moment, the engine still running, as Amanda walked into the house. The weight of the evening pressed down on me, suffocating and relentless. And deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. The morning after the family gathering, the house was eerily quiet. Amanda stayed in bed long after I got up, scrolling through her phone, ignoring me entirely. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and stared out the window, replaying last night in my head like a bad movie I couldn't turn off. When Amanda finally emerged, she was radiant, as if nothing had happened. "Morning," she said cheerfully, pouring herself a cup of coffee. Her tone was light, almost dismissive. "Morning," I replied, my voice flat. She sat across from me, taking small sips, her eyes locked on her phone. I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Amanda," I said, my voice firmer than I'd expected. "What was that last night?" She didn't look up. "What was what?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about. The way you were acting with Trevor. The things you said about me in front of everyone." Finally, she glanced up, her expression a mixture of boredom and irritation. "Oh, Jack, stop being so sensitive. It was just harmless fun. Everyone was laughing. You should learn to laugh at yourself once in a while." I clenched my fists under the table, trying to steady my voice. "It didn't feel harmless. It felt like you were deliberately trying to embarrass me." Amanda rolled her eyes, setting her coffee cup down with a sharp clink. "Oh, here we go again. You're always playing the victim." Do you have any idea how exhausting that is? Maybe if you were a little more confident, you wouldn't feel so threatened every time I talk to another man. Her words hit me like a slap. Threatened? Amanda, you were practically throwing yourself at my brother. She laughed. A sharp, cruel sound that made my stomach churn. Don't flatter yourself, Jack. Trevor's just fun to talk to. Something you've apparently forgotten how to be. The conversation ended there. She stood, grabbed her coffee, and walked out of the room, leaving me alone with my anger and humiliation. The rest of the day was no better. Amanda kept up her usual routine of veiled insults and icy indifference, but now there was something new. A smugness in her tone, as if she enjoyed watching me squirm. By evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to call Trevor. I needed answers, or at least some perspective. "Hey, Jack," he said when he picked up. "What's up?" I hesitated for a moment, unsure how to start. "Trevor, about last night. Did you notice anything, strange with Amanda?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. Strange? Not really. I mean, she was a little, I don't know, flirty, I guess? But that's just Amanda, right? She's always like that. "No," I said firmly. "She's not always like that. Not with you. Not in front of me." Trevor sighed. "Look, Jack, if it bothered you, maybe you should talk to her about it. I didn't mean to step on any toes, man. I was just trying to be polite." "It's not about you," I said quickly. I don't know what's going on anymore." We ended the call on an awkward note, and I felt worse than before. Trevor's casual dismissal of Amanda's behavior only confirmed what I already feared. No one saw the cracks in our relationship but me. That night, as I lay in bed next to Amanda, who had already fallen asleep, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. I didn't know how much more of this I could take. And then, in the silence, a terrifying thought crept into my mind. What if she wanted me to break? A week after the family gathering, Amanda and I were invited to a dinner party hosted by some mutual friends. I wasn't keen on going, but Amanda insisted. "It'll be good for us," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her tone made it clear that refusing wasn't an option. The night of the party, she took her time getting ready. As I stood in the hallway waiting, she walked out of the bedroom in a sleek, red dress that clung to her figure. She looked stunning, but something about the way she carried herself set me on edge. It wasn't for me. When we arrived, the house was already filled with people, the hum of conversation and clinking glasses filling the air. Amanda immediately slipped into her social butterfly mode, charming everyone with her wit and laughter. I hung back, sipping my drink and trying to blend into the background. It didn't take long for Amanda to find a group of men to entertain. I watched from across the room as she laughed at their jokes, her hand resting lightly on the arm of one of them. My stomach churned, but I stayed rooted to the spot, unsure of what to do. Eventually, one of our friends, Mike, waved me over. "Jack, come join us," he called out. Reluctantly, I made my way to their circle. Amanda barely acknowledged me as I approached. "Oh, there he is," she said with a grin. "My husband, the quiet one." The group chuckled, and I forced a weak smile. "So, Jack," one of the men said, "Amanda was just telling us how you're not much of a handyman. Said you flooded your kitchen trying to fix the sink." The familiar sting of humiliation hit me like a wave. "Yeah, well, not everyone's born with a toolbox in their hands," I said, trying to play along. Amanda laughed, leaning into the man who had spoken. "That's putting it mildly," she said. "But it's okay. Not everyone can be a Trevor." The mention of my brother's name felt like a knife twisting in my chest. The group burst into laughter, and I stood there, my face burning, wishing the ground would swallow me whole. As the night wore on, Amanda's behavior grew bolder. She flirted openly with nearly every man in the room, her laughter ringing out like a bell, each sound a reminder of my inadequacy in her eyes. At one point, she turned to the group and said loudly, "Jack's the perfect husband. He doesn't mind me having a little fun. Right, honey?" The room erupted in laughter again, but I couldn't take it anymore. I set my drink down and walked out onto the balcony, the cool night air hitting me like a slap. I leaned against the railing, staring out at the city lights, my mind racing. How had it come to this? How had the woman I once loved become someone who took pleasure in tearing me down? A few minutes later, Amanda appeared in the doorway. "What are you doing out here?" she asked, her voice sharp. "Just needed some air," I said without looking at her. She walked over and stood next to me, her perfume wafting in the breeze. "You're always so dramatic, Jack. It was just a joke. Lighten up." "It didn't feel like a joke," I said quietly. She sighed, exasperated. "God, you're so sensitive. No wonder people don't take you seriously." I turned to her, my voice trembling with anger. "Why do you do this, Amanda? Why do you enjoy humiliating me?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she smiled. A cold, calculating smile that made my blood run cold. "Because you let me." Her words hung in the air like a dark cloud, and for the first time, I saw her for who she truly was, and I realized I couldn't keep living like this. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed. Amanda had already gone, leaving a faint trace of her perfume behind. The events of the previous night replayed in my mind, each moment cutting deeper than the last. Her final words, "Because you let me," echoed over and over. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my coffee cup, my hands trembling slightly. This couldn't go on. For years, I'd convinced myself that her words were harmless, that her behavior was just her way of coping with stress or boredom. But now I couldn't deny the truth. Amanda didn't respect me. She didn't even see me as her equal. When she finally walked through the door that afternoon, carrying shopping bags and wearing a carefree smile, I knew I had to confront her. "Amanda, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady but firm. She raised an eyebrow, setting her bags down. "About what?" "About last night. About everything. I'm tired of being your punching bag." Her smile faded, replaced by a look of irritation. "Oh, here we go again. Jack, can't you just let it go? You're always so serious." "No," I said firmly. "I won't let it go this time. You humiliate me in front of everyone. You make me feel small. And you don't care." She crossed her arms, her expression cold. "If you're so unhappy, Jack, maybe you should do something about it." Her words stung, but they also lit a fire inside me. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of defiance. "Maybe I will," I said, meeting her gaze. For a moment, we stood there in silence, the air between us heavy with unspoken tension. And in that moment, I realized that things would never be the same. The next day, I found myself sitting in my car outside Trevor's apartment. I hadn't planned to come here, but something about Amanda's behavior at the dinner party had pushed me to the edge. I needed to talk to someone who might understand, or at least someone I could trust. Trevor opened the door, surprised to see me. "Jack, what's up? Everything okay? Can we talk?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. He nodded, stepping aside to let me in. His apartment was neat with minimal decor, a sharp contrast to the chaos swirling in my head. We sat down, and I took a deep breath before speaking. "Trevor, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." He furrowed his brow, leaning forward. "Of course. What's going on? Do you think Amanda cares about me? I mean, really cares?" Trevor hesitated, his expression torn. "Jack, what are you talking about? She's your wife." "Of course she—" "No," I interrupted. "I mean, does she respect me? Because it feels like she doesn't. And I'm starting to think she never has." Trevor leaned back, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look, man, I don't know what's going on between you two, but, yeah, she can be a little harsh sometimes, like at the party. Honestly, I didn't know what to say when she kept making those jokes about you." His words hit me harder than I expected. If even Trevor had noticed, how bad did it look to everyone else? "Why didn't you say something?" I asked, my voice tinged with frustration. Trevor sighed. "I didn't want to make things worse. She's intimidating, Jack. And, honestly, I figured you'd want to handle it yourself." Silence hung between us. I felt a mix of anger, shame, and a growing determination to finally do something about my situation. "Thanks for being honest," I said finally, standing up. Trevor looked at me, concern etched on his face. "Jack, If you need anything, I mean it, just call me. I nodded and left, my mind racing. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't completely alone. That evening, I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching Amanda as she sat on the bed, scrolling through her phone. The weight of the conversation I'd been avoiding for so long hung heavily in the air. My heart was pounding, my palms clammy, but there was no turning back. Amanda, we need to talk, I said, my voice quieter than I wanted it to be. She didn't look up, still absorbed in her phone. About what, Jack? You already made a scene this morning. I stepped into the room, shutting the door behind me. This isn't just about last night. It's everything. The way you talk to me, the way you treat me. I can't keep pretending it's okay. Amanda finally looked up, a thin smile playing on her lips. Jack, you're being dramatic again. What exactly is the problem? The calmness in her tone made my blood boil. The problem is that you don't care about me. You humiliate me, Amanda. You tear me down in front of others, and you don't even notice, or worse, you enjoy it. Her expression hardened, her eyes narrowing. I'm just having fun, Jack. You take everything so seriously. If you weren't so sensitive, this wouldn't even be an issue. I felt a fire ignite in me. That's the problem, Amanda. You only care about your own fun. You don't think about how I feel. You don't think about how you make me feel like I'm nothing. Amanda stood up, her hands on her hips. You want me to stop being myself for you? To cater to your insecurities? If you can't handle it, maybe it's time to reevaluate this whole thing. Her words stung, but I refused to back down. You know what, Amanda? Maybe I will reevaluate this whole thing. I don't deserve to be treated like this anymore. For a moment, the room was silent. I could hear my own breath, sharp and ragged, in the stillness. Then, Amanda's voice broke the tension, colder than ice. So what? You're going to leave me? After everything I've done for you? I looked at her, finally realizing just how far I'd fallen. I don't know yet, but I'm not going to keep being your punching bag. Not anymore. Amanda's face twisted into a scowl, and I saw the mask crack for a moment. Fine, Jack. Do whatever you want. I don't care anymore. I turned and walked out of the room, not looking back. As I stood at the foot of the stairs, my heart heavy with the weight of what I just said, I knew that the confrontation had only been the beginning. I didn't know what the future held, but I did know one thing for certain. I was done letting her control me. The days that followed were strange. The silence between Amanda and me was suffocating, filling the house with a tension that felt almost unbearable. She wasn't home much, claiming she had work or plans with friends. I didn't ask where she went. I didn't want to know. I threw myself into my work, trying to distract myself from the storm brewing in my mind. But every time I looked up, the empty space beside me in bed felt more and more like a gaping hole. Amanda wasn't physically present, but the weight of her absence was more oppressive than her presence ever had been. On the third day after our confrontation, she came home late, just as I was sitting down to eat alone. I didn't bother pretending to be busy. I just stared at her, waiting for her to acknowledge the elephant in the room. She walked in, barely glancing at me as she set her purse down. You still here? I didn't answer immediately. I had so many things I wanted to say, but for the first time in years, I felt like I didn't even know where to begin. Finally, I spoke, my voice rough. Where were you? Amanda didn't flinch. She just shrugged. Out with friends. Out with friends? You've been out with friends for days now, and you don't even care to tell me where you're going or when you'll be back. Is that what this is now? She stopped, her expression flat. I don't owe you an explanation, Jack. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I wasn't backing down. No, you don't owe me an explanation, Amanda, but I deserve some respect. I'm your husband. You can't keep treating me like I don't matter. She crossed her arms, looking at me with a mixture of indifference and disdain. I'm not the one with the problem here, Jack. You are. You've always been the problem. You're too sensitive, too insecure. Maybe if you grew a backbone, we wouldn't be in this mess. Her words stung, but something inside me shifted. I wasn't going to let her keep tearing me apart with her words. I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest. Maybe I don't want to be in this mess anymore, I said, my voice cold. Amanda raised an eyebrow. What are you saying, Jack? I'm saying that I'm done. I can't keep living like this. This isn't a relationship. It's a constant battle, and I'm tired of fighting alone. Her expression faltered for a second, but then she smirked. So what now? You're leaving me? I don't know yet, but I'm not staying in a marriage where I'm constantly belittled, ignored, and humiliated. I turned to walk away, but before I reached the door, I heard her call out, her voice shaky but sharp. Don't think you're going to find someone better, Jack. You won't. No one else will put up with you like I do. I stopped but didn't turn around. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe I've been letting you get away with things for far too long. With that, I left. The days after I left Amanda felt like a blur. I stayed in a small apartment I rented on a whim, just a few miles away from our house. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The emptiness of it was almost comforting, like I could finally breathe again without feeling the weight of Amanda's constant presence hovering over me. I spent the first few days in a daze, unsure of what to do next. There was a part of me that missed her, that wondered if this was all just a misunderstanding. I replayed every moment of our relationship, our early days together, when everything had seemed so perfect, so full of promise. How had we gotten here? But then I remembered her words. You let me. Those words kept me going. I'd let her control the narrative for so long, let her make me feel small and insignificant. I realized now that I had been complicit, allowing myself to be manipulated into thinking I wasn't worthy of better. But that was over now. I spent hours talking to friends who had been there for me, people who saw the changes in Amanda before I did. Trevor, in particular, kept telling me that I deserved more, that I was worth more than the way Amanda treated me. One afternoon, I sat on the balcony of my new place, staring out at the busy street below. The noise felt distant, almost like it wasn't real. And then I made a decision. I was done. I knew I couldn't go back to that life. I couldn't go back to being the man who allowed someone to tear him down at every opportunity. It wasn't just about Amanda anymore. It was about me. It was about my self-worth and what I was willing to accept. I called Amanda later that evening. My hands shook as I dialed her number, but I was certain of one thing. This was it. She answered after a few rings. What do you want, Jack? She asked, her voice flat. I want a divorce. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. For a moment I thought she might hang up, or worse, try to convince me otherwise. Then, she spoke, her tone cold and biting. You think you can do better than me? Go ahead. See how far that gets you. I'm not trying to do better, Amanda, I said, my voice calm. I'm just trying to do better for myself. I can't keep doing this. I'm done. She didn't say anything more. The line went silent again, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was the one being abandoned. I ended the call, setting my phone down beside me. It was done. I wasn't sure what the future would hold, or if I'd ever fully recover from the damage Amanda had done. But I knew one thing. I would never allow anyone to treat me like that again. I was free. The days after the phone call with Amanda felt strangely calm. I kept expecting the emotional storm to hit, the overwhelming sense of regret or second-guessing. But it never came. Instead, there was a quiet peace that settled over me, as if I had just stepped out of a suffocating room into fresh air. I focused on rebuilding. I threw myself into my work, something I had neglected for years. For the first time in what felt like forever, I took pride in my achievements, in the small victories I'd forgotten to celebrate. It wasn't much, but it was enough to remind me that I was capable of succeeding on my own. I also spent more time with friends, those who had stood by me through the mess of my marriage. Trevor became a constant presence in my life. We spent weekends fishing, talking about everything and nothing, and slowly, I began to feel like I was reclaiming parts of myself that had been lost. One afternoon, as I sat at a cafe with Trevor, he leaned across the table, his eyes serious. Jack, I want to say something. I know it's been hard, but I'm proud of you. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for. I smiled, grateful but surprised. Thanks, man. I don't feel strong, but I'm getting there. He nodded, his expression thoughtful. You know, you're not the only one who's been through stuff like this. A lot of people go through toxic relationships and come out the other side stronger. You just have to keep moving forward. The words stuck with me long after our conversation ended. He was right. I wasn't alone. There were countless people who had been in situations like mine, who had been manipulated and broken down by someone they loved, but had found a way to rise again. As the weeks passed, I took small steps toward finding out who I was without Amanda. I started running again, something I hadn't done in years. It was hard at first, my body sluggish and unused to the effort, but each day it became a little easier. One evening, I sat on my balcony, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The city was quiet, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace with myself. I wasn't sure what the future held, whether I'd ever find love again or if I'd be alone for the rest of my life. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let anyone ever make me feel worthless again. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was ready to face it. The months that followed my separation from Amanda weren't easy, but they were transformative. I learned to trust myself again, to believe that I had the strength to move forward, even when the path seemed unclear. There were days when the weight of the past felt like a shadow that followed me everywhere. But with each new day, I pushed it further away. I started seeing a therapist, something I had never considered before. At first, it felt awkward, sitting in a small office with a stranger, talking about things I had kept buried for so long. But as the sessions progressed, I began to understand the depth of the emotional toll my marriage had taken on me. The gaslighting, the manipulation, the subtle ways Amanda had chipped away at my confidence. All of it had left scars I hadn't been aware of until now. But with therapy, those scars started to heal. I learned how to set boundaries, how to recognize toxic behaviors, and most importantly, how to value myself. One evening, a few months after the divorce was finalized, Trevor invited me out to a local bar with a group of friends. It had been a while since I'd done anything social, and at first I hesitated. I wasn't sure if I was ready to be around so many people, especially strangers. But something inside me pushed me to go. When I walked into the bar, the familiar hum of conversation and laughter filled the air. The group of friends greeted me with warm smiles, and soon enough, I found myself laughing, joking, and even enjoying the feeling of being in a crowd again. It felt strange, almost foreign, but in a good way. As the night wore on, I ended up talking to a woman named Sarah. She was kind and easy to talk to, and for the first time in a long time I felt a spark of connection. We talked about everything: life, love, our pasts, and somehow the conversation felt natural, like we had known each other for years. At the end of the night, she gave me her number with a shy smile. "It was really nice talking to you, Jack," she said. I couldn't help but smile back, a feeling of hope creeping into my chest. Maybe there was a chance for me to find happiness again. Maybe I wasn't broken after all. That night, as I lay in bed, I reflected on how far I had come. It hadn't been an easy journey, but every step forward had been worth it. The pain, the heartbreak, the betrayal, it had all been a part of the process. And now, I was standing on the other side of it, stronger and more self-aware than ever before. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my own life again. The following weeks passed in a blur of new experiences. Sarah and I saw each other a few more times, and while it felt good to spend time with someone new, I couldn't ignore the wariness that still lingered deep inside me. Every time we were together, I found myself holding back, unsure if I was truly ready to open up again. After all, Amanda's betrayal had left deep scars that weren't easy to forget. I told Sarah about my past, about my marriage, about the painful way it had ended. She listened without judgment, offering kind words and understanding, but I could still feel the hesitation in my heart. Trust, I realized, wasn't something that could be rebuilt overnight. In my therapy sessions, I had learned that trusting others and myself would be a gradual process. Couldn't rush it. And yet, even though I was cautious, there was a part of me that wanted to believe in the possibility of real connection again. One evening, Sarah invited me to a small dinner party she was hosting. I had to admit I was nervous. The thought of being around so many people, especially after everything I had been through, made my stomach churn. But I agreed, telling myself that this was another step in moving forward, in finding my way back to normalcy. The evening went better than I expected. Sarah's friends were warm and welcoming, and despite my initial anxiety, I found myself enjoying the conversation. I even laughed, something I hadn't done in what felt like forever. But then, as the night wound down, something unexpected happened. I was standing in the kitchen, talking to one of Sarah's friends, when I heard a voice from behind me. "Jack? Is that you?" I turned around, my heart sinking into my stomach. Standing there, a little tipsy and wearing a familiar smirk, was Amanda. The shock hit me like a slap. She had somehow found out where I was. And now, there she stood, the woman who had torn me apart, as if nothing had ever happened. Sarah, noticing my discomfort, stepped forward. "Amanda, what are you doing here?" Amanda smiled and shrugged, unfazed. "I'm just visiting some old friends. Didn't know Jack was one of them." My mind raced. I could feel the old anxiety rising in me, the feelings of inadequacy and fear that had once ruled my life. But I took a deep breath, reminded myself how far I had come, and forced a calm smile. "Amanda," I said, my voice steady, "I think it's time for you to leave." She raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback by my response. "Really? I don't think I need permission to be here, Jack." "You do," I replied firmly. "This isn't your place anymore, and I'm done letting you make me feel uncomfortable." I saw her face twitch with anger, but she didn't say anything else. With a half-hearted smile, she turned and left, her heels clicking loudly against the floor. The tension in the room was palpable as everyone else quietly went back to their conversations. But Sarah gave me a small, supportive smile. "You okay?" I nodded, feeling both shaken and empowered. It had taken everything in me to stand my ground, to not fall back into the person I had been when Amanda controlled my every move. But I had done it, and in that moment, I realized how much I had grown. I was no longer afraid of her. The rest of the evening was quiet, but I felt a sense of relief wash over me. It wasn't just about Amanda leaving. It was about me reclaiming my own space, my own peace of mind. I had learned how to protect myself, to stand up for myself, and that realization filled me with a deep sense of pride. The months after Amanda's unexpected appearance at Sarah's dinner party felt like a new chapter in my life. I had finally let go of the past, and while the scars were still there, they no longer defined me. My relationship with Sarah blossomed slowly, but I approached it differently. I was no longer willing to settle for anything less than respect and trust. Sarah was patient, understanding, and kind. I never once felt pressured, and that allowed me to relax and enjoy our time together. The more I got to know her, the more I realized that there were still good people out there. But even more importantly, I had come to understand that I didn't need someone else to define my worth. My self-respect and happiness didn't depend on a relationship. It came from within. One night, after a quiet dinner, I looked at Sarah and said, "I'm really glad I met you." She smiled, her eyes warm. "I'm glad too, Jack." And for the first time in a long time, I truly believed it. Years passed, and the past with Amanda began to feel more like a distant memory. The pain faded, replaced by growth and self-discovery. I found strength I didn't know I had, and it allowed me to build a life I was proud of. Sarah and I moved in together, our bond growing deeper with each passing day. We created a life of mutual respect, trust, and love. Everything I had been searching for all along. It was simple, but it was real. One evening, as we sat on the porch together, I realized how much I had changed. The man I was when I first left Amanda felt like someone else, someone lost. Now I knew who I was. "I've come a long way, haven't I?" I said to Sarah, a soft smile on my face. She leaned her head on my shoulder. "You sure have, Jack. And I'm so proud of you." For the first time in years, I felt truly free. As I look back on everything, the pain, the heartbreak, and the struggle, I realized that it was all a part of a greater journey. I used to think that I had to endure the pain and the mistreatment to be loved, to be worthy. But what I've learned is that self-worth isn't something anyone else can give you. It has to come from within. Amanda's betrayal will always be a part of my story, but it doesn't define me. What defines me now is the strength I found in myself, the relationships I've built, and the person I've become. Sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the greatest growth. Leaving was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the most important. I'm not the same man I was when I first walked away from that life. And for that, I'm grateful. If you've been through something similar, I want you to know you're not alone. It's easy to feel trapped in toxic relationships, but you have the strength to break free. If my story has resonated with you, I encourage you to share your thoughts in the comments. Remember, it's never too late to rebuild your life. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories of resilience and personal growth. Take care, and never stop believing in yourself.